Good day, students. Today we are going to discuss about the relationship between history and religion. As we know that religion and history are interconnected issues, they are interconnected in the sense that since history studies the nature and progress of human civilizations over the course of time, the religious aspirations of men and women and the formation of civilizations obviously led to an interaction between the concepts of religiosity, of spirituality, and mysticism, and these have been part and parcel of the study of history. So, in today's lecture, we would be looking at what we mean by religion, what is the relationship between religion and history, what are the methods by which religious studies and other such terms which have been used for the academic study of religion in terms of history, how have they originated, and how have scholars tried to analyze religious affairs of human civilization across time. We will also be looking at the various dimensions of religious history and the different genres that originated over the course of time. So, if we move on, what do we mean by history and what is the relationship between history and religion? As we understand that religion is a very fundamental aspect of human existence, and it provides meaning, it provides purpose and goals to humans in order to live their lives, and it gives them a purpose to live their lives purposefully. So, we must understand that human beings, in the sense of being integrated into a community and in other forms of community living, for example, the nation, in the sense of a society, all of these were connected with ideas of religiosity as well. So, the terms religiosity, which comes from the Latin religio, spirituality, which comes from the Latin word spiritualitas, and mysticism and other such terms have been used in order to understand human aspirations which look towards the supernatural and which gives them a purpose to live their lives. We must understand also that such ideas about religiosity and spirituality have evolved over the course of time. And because they have evolved, it is extremely important for us to locate such evolution in a historical sense. That is, we must locate the time as well as the place in which such ideas emerge. So, historical consciousness and historically contextualizing the emergence of religious aspirations is an important facet which enables us to locate the boundaries of both history and religiosity and religion. As we also understand, every religion, every tradition and faith that has emerged has had its own answers, own ways of understanding, and religious history and history of religion tries to locate these understandings as per the tradition concerned. So, we are able to locate the particular and the universal in terms of religiosity in history as we map these traditions historically. So, the significance of religion in history is obviously important, and it also comes within the broader facet of cultural history as a whole. So, religion, religiosity, and the formation of different traditions become important for us to understand the cultural evolution of mankind as a whole. This understanding of religion, however, is a little hazy. What we mean by religion, what we define as religion, is different as per the different traditions that have emerged. So, it is certainly a hazy concept. But however, we must also understand that it's a very powerful and persistent idea, and it can be seen across cultures, across religions and across time, and also in terms of regions all over the globe. Every human society has had some form of religious identity and religious aspiration in terms of their way of dealing with phenomena, either the natural phenomena or the supernatural phenomena. So, from prehistoric times, we find when people used to live in caves and used to hunt, they began worshipping various kinds of gods and goddesses, and also tried to believe that such propitiation of these gods would lead them to a better life, to the availability of animals to hunt, to better crops, and so on and so forth. With the coming in of the historical scenario, that is, with the emergence of texts, with the emergence of written languages, we find that humans also began to write down their religious aspirations in books and began to also orally transmit such religious beliefs through generations. And these texts, these oral formalities, also began to create a new arena for religious understanding. Therefore, some religious aspirations which have been seen, for example, within Judaism, within Christianity, and within Islam, these are monotheistic identities, whereby they believe in one God. However, there are also various civilizations which believed in various gods, a multiplicity of ideas of divinity. For example, the Egyptian civilization, the Chinese civilization, the Roman and the Greek civilizations also began to frame their religious ideas in terms of a multiplicity of divinities. In India also we find that Hinduism, which originated at least from the 2nd millennium BC, also had this framework of pluralistic gods and goddesses. And these plural gods and goddesses also changed and evolved over the course of time. For instance, the early gods and goddesses like Indra or Varuna became less important with the passage of time. And we find that the trio of Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar or Shiva became more important with the passage of time. So, the Hindu concepts of religiosity and other such concepts of religiosity in different parts of the globe were in some ways different to each other, but they were also significantly connected in a certain scenario. So then, what is exactly religion? As we have just stated, it is very difficult to define it, but there were also attempts by several scholars over the course of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century to define religious ideas and concepts. We find that Karl Marx, in the middle of the 19th century, tried to define religion as the opium of the masses. Marxists implied that there would be a disappearance of religion with the coming in of a classless society. However, we must also understand that these ideas of religion as a superstructure over and above the economic and social realities of the base are considered to be more or less an idea of the past now. However, there were also other definitions which had been given. For instance, religious ideas are illusions, fulfillments of the oldest, strongest, and most urgent wishes of mankind. Religion is the universal obsessional neurosis of humanity. This is how Sigmund Freud, in the late 19th century, tried to define religion. However, Émile Durkheim, another French sociologist, tried to look at religion as a unified system of beliefs and practices which unite into one single moral community all those who adhere to them. And various other such definitions have been given by historians, sociologists, anthropologists, and so on and so forth. However, we must also understand that the academic study of religion and the presence of religiosity are two different things. Religiosity has been present across civilizations from times immemorial. However, the academic study of history and religious history, to be precise, began to emerge in an academic scenario only from the 18th and the 19th century onward. And these ideas about religious history and the history of religion tried to showcase how humans have been able to evolve their religious ideas in a sense of evolutionary stance. We find that religious studies as a genre began to emerge much later, only in the middle of the 20th century. And the middle of the 20th century also saw the proliferation of various departments across universities in America and in the West, in Europe, and in other parts of the world, which tried to begin courses on the academic study of religion. We find that these courses and these types of studies in an academic scenario began to locate religious history as a specific and definite field of study from the middle of the 20th century onwards. So, religious studies and histories of religion are not about studying religion per se. These are not going to enable students to become confessional scholars, that is, believers in religion. They are only going to attempt to locate how important religious traditions have emerged across time and how those traditions can be analyzed, can be studied, and can be also analyzed from an academic scenario. So, we find that being religious, that is, a religious practitioner, is one thing, and the academic study of religion is another thing. And the academic study of religion, or the relationship between history and religion, tries to promote the latter, which is the academic way of understanding religion and religious change over time. The academic study of religion is also a very interdisciplinary field. We find that the interdisciplinariness is located not just within the field of history, but also philology, also anthropology, sociology, linguistics, and other such disciplines. So, religious studies and the histories of religion try to combine a variety of methods, a variety of disciplines in their analysis of histories of religion. And we must also understand that religious studies as a genre tries to locate all these subsets of disciplines within a field of study and gives a focus to religious studies from different perspectives. So, the terminologies are very important over here. Are we speaking of histories of religion or religious history? Religious history would mean the history of a particular religious tradition as it emerged. For example, the history of Christianity, the history of Islam, the history of Hinduism, etc., and so on and so forth. But the study of religion or the history of religion would mean that we would be trying to look at different historical traditions which have contributed to the making of religious history as a whole. So, different traditions can be analyzed sequentially or comparatively in terms of academic study by the histories of religion format. So, we find that various terms have emerged within the study of religion. For example, we have divinity studies, theological studies. We also have terms like comparative analysis of religion. We have histories of religion, and even lately we have terms like dharmic studies which have emerged. which try to showcase that the Indian conceptions of religion were somewhat different from other Western traditions. So, therefore, there is a variety of terms which have emerged for the analysis of history and religion as a subject. Now, why do we want to study history of religion? There are various motivations, there are various conditions which have emerged. For instance, we find that in any tradition or text, how was holiness perceived? How was the idea of the sacred perceived by people of those traditions? These are questions which can be posed by a historian when he or she tries to look at religious history or histories of religion. Which categories of people were thought of as holy? Why were certain concepts of religion becoming more important at a certain stage of time? Which texts became important for certain segments of society at certain contexts, and why not others? So, we find that there is a variety of questions which have been addressed by scholars of histories of religion. Let us now turn to how the study of religion has taken place over the course of time. One must understand that the idea of religion and religiosity as a whole was not something which was new. The Greeks, the Romans, as well as all other ancient civilizations knew of it, and they tried to give a focus to their ideas about religiosity in their own ways. For example, in Greece, we find that the Greek myths were studied by historians as early as the 7th and the 8th century BCE by Hesiod, the Greek poet. We also find the rise of speculative philosophy and the rise of Ionian philosophers like Thales of Miletus, Heraclitus, Anaximander, and others who tried to locate the idea of religion in the Greek civilization. Even later, the Greek concepts of religion continued to a certain extent during the Roman times. And thereafter, with the coming in of Christianity from the 1st century AD and the idea that the Christian sense would prevail over the Roman concept of pre-Christian gods, led to an inter-exchange and the intermeshing of different kinds of religious concepts from the 1st century AD onwards. We find that during the Middle Ages, and especially during the Reformation, the ideas of religion underwent another form of change in the Western civilization. The spread of Christianity into Northern Europe and other parts of Europe led scholars to try to locate the similarities between the Christian ideals and the ideals of the pagan civilizations in the northern fringes of Europe. We also find that the coming in of scholastic philosophy, which was in response to a certain extent of the new idea of Islamic theology that originated from the 7th century AD onwards, tried to create a new sense of religious understanding. And this religious understanding obviously went on towards the Renaissance to create even newer understandings of religiosity. During the Renaissance, whereby the ideas of Greece and Rome were now almost reinitiated, this led to tensions between the Christian conceptions of religiosity and the more pagan conceptions of Christianity and other pre-Christian forms in Greece and Rome. We find that the Italian humanist Giovanni Boccaccio in the 14th century, and even others like the Dutch humanist Desiderius Erasmus, trying to look for the highest truth within religious understandings and look at it from a historical sense. We also find that during this period, post-Renaissance period, we find that scholars began to look at other civilizations. The age of discoveries created a new sense of urgency to look for other societies, other civilizations across the globe. And it was during this period that the Spanish monk Bernardino de Sahagún or J. Lafitau and others, like, for example, the Jesuit priests, the Italian Jesuits, for example, Roberto de Nobili and Matteo Ricci, who looked at traditions in China and India and tried to look at the religious aspirations and specific traditions across different cultures. So the idea that comparative analysis of religious conceptions can be made was one of the new ideas which came in during the Renaissance and the post-Renaissance times. The beginnings of the modern period from the 17th and the 18th century onward brought about newer conceptions about religiosity. For example, Giambattista Vico in the 18th century tried to frame an evolutionary stance of the conceptions of religion. In fact, he stated that religion evolved in the Greek society through 4 definite stages: the divinization of nature, the divinization of powers that human beings had come to control, for example, fire and crops and other things. The 3rd stage being the divinization of institutions, social institutions like marriage. And the 4th and the final phase being the process of humanizing the gods, as in the works of Homer and others. So this evolutionary pattern, which was established by scholars from the 18th century onwards, began to see and look at religious history from a new perspective. We also find the Scottish philosopher David Hume, in his Natural History of Religion, try to define religiosity outside the bounds of the pre-Renaissance conceptions. So we find that the idea of rationalism, the idea that all religious aspirations were human in nature and humans tried to rationalize their natural surroundings in a certain format, and that is what constitutes history of religion, is what comes up in the 18th century. The rationalism of Immanuel Kant and also the origin of Oriental studies with the conquest of different parts of the globe under colonial empires, for example, especially in India, we find that Orientalism and the study of Oriental cultures and the coming in of new disciplines like anthropology and other subjects like history began to create a new sense of urgency for the study of human religions. So, religiosity over the course of time has been understood from various angles. We find that the 19th century also began to see a new tradition of analysis of religion from the sociological and the anthropological angle. We find that sociologists like Max Weber tried to look at the religious aspirations of mankind through various stages. In his famous book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Max Weber tried to connect the ideas of Protestantism with Calvin's ideas and how it led to the emergence of capitalism in the Middle Ages and the later Middle Ages. He also tried to look at different cultures through various categories. For example, the idea of prophecy, the idea of charisma, and the routinization of charisma are certain theories which were propounded by Max Weber. The anthropological studies of religion have been most fruitful in terms of the study of history of religion, and these tried to look at myths, rituals, magic, belief, and other such aspects from an anthropological genre. The anthropological genre, however, has had 3 separate sub-stages. For example, we find that the first phase went from the 1860s or the 50s till around 1900s. when we find scholars like John Lubbock and Edward Burnett Tylor and Herbert Spencer try to propound certain conceptions of anthropology which tried to deal with evolution and the origin of religion. The questions about origin, about evolution of religion are what were considered by these scholars in the later half of the 19th century. The second phase of anthropological inquiries about religion came from the 1900s onward, and these went on till around the 1950s, and within which we find a new approach which came in, which was the functional and the structural approach to religion. The functional and the structural approach to religion was propounded by scholars like Emil Durkheim and also by anthropologists like Bronislaw Malinowski. And these constitute a separate significant step in the understanding of religious history. The third phase of religious understanding within the anthropological stance came from the 1950s onward. And there were various scholars like Evans Pritchard, Clifford Geertz, Douglas Leach, and Levi Strauss, among others, who tried to take another meaning altogether about religious history. And this was the understanding of meaning, the interpretative anthropology, the symbolist anthropology. They tried to look at religion as a cluster of symbols of a certain culture. And this constituted the third significant phase of understanding religiosity in the historical sense. So the methodologies of doing religious history are essentially multifaceted. It can be textual study of religious texts. It can be sociological studies of different genres of religious traditions. And also it can be the anthropological genre, which looks at contemporary civilizations in order to understand the past. So, coming to the final arena, what are the dimensions of the study of religious history that we have today? The dimensions of religious history have been too varied to cover within a single field. In fact, we find that the relationship between religious patronage, religious classes, and state formations across time have been studied by scholars. We find that the relationship between religion and society has been worked about. The way in which the caste system, the way in which discrimination plays a role in the constitution of religious ideas has been analyzed. We find that the forms of religion and religious expression, tribal, elite, popular, and so on and so forth, have also been studied by scholars. Institutional and organizational histories of the church, other such institutions like, for example, the caliphate in Islam, and also of different other orders like the Buddhist Sangha or the Hindu temples and mutts, have been studied by scholars. There is also another dimension of the analysis of religious texts and its interpretations by scholars across religious traditions. The relationship of religion with philosophy, with ethics, has also been a very fruitful arena of study. The relationship of the evolution of religious divinities across time, how cultures begin to change their stance towards certain gods and goddesses. And this evolution has also been studied by scholars. There is also another arena which has come under focus, which is religious personalities and the ideas of charisma across cultures. Like, for example, the Buddha, Moses, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, and others have been looked at by scholars of history of religion. Religious rituals and practices, religious networks, pilgrimages, and circulation of individuals across different cultures have also been looked at. The case studies of sacred complexes and place histories, which have been clubbed under the title of Mahatmyas of certain areas, have been looked at. Religious movements and cults have also been analyzed by historians. And we also have various new genres which are coming in the present context. For example, the relationship between religion and food history, the idea of prasad and how it plays a role in the constitution of the human mindset, the religion and its relationship between the growth of languages and literature, the relationship of religion and the arts, sculpture, architecture. These are also issues which have been studied lately. There is also another area which is religion and music, how music and musical genres have played a major role in the constitution of religiosity across traditions. Religion and violence, how religion has led to interfaith disharmony. This has also been analyzed by scholars, as the ideas of toleration, of universalism, and of peace, they have also been studied. Religion and political identity, secularism, the idea of sectarianism, separatism, they have also been identified. The ideas of minority versus majority religions have also been looked at by scholars. And finally, the idea of religion in the transnational diaspora, of how Indian cultures traveled abroad, and religiosity in a transnational diasporic sense is different from the religion in which it originated. So we find that the entirety of religious studies and the histories of religion are quite diverse, and the intermixture, the ideas of toleration, syncretism, and mutual harmony have also been looked at by scholars over the course of time. So we can conclude that religion and history are combined disciplines. They can be looked at in a very multi-dimensional, multi-perspective way. And this is important for the analysis of both history as well as religiosity. Thank you so much.